Agreed? It's agreed. Would all those in favor of the motion please say yea? Contrary minded? Motion's carried. The House is adjourned till 2 p.m. tomorrow. We have now reached the moment of interruption. Subject of this evening's debate is therefore be it resolved that the Ham government move immediately towards a full review of all benefit schemes from offshore resources so that all Nova Scotians can start to see much needed benefits coming into the province. I'd like to recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to use my time allotted to me tonight to speak about, as the motion says, the benefits that should go to Nova Scotians. Now, as you know, most of us in this province are well aware that this resolution has been prompted by yesterday's announcement by ExxonMobil that they have let their contract for a compression deck, and they've done it offshore. And you know, that by itself is I think an extremely hard blow to the industry here in the province. And if it was by itself, like I said, as bad as it appears, that it would be a hurdle that we could get over fairly quickly, I would assume. But I think it's fast becoming within Nova Scotia that deals like this are the ones that may very well be the straw that broke the camel's back. We've been on the losing end of more deals, if you will, around our offshore than we've been on the winning end. And for anybody to tell us today that we have substantively gained, or in a majority way, gained the work and the resource or the revenue that was owed to us through our offshore deals would be only kidding ourselves, let alone kidding the public at large. What we have is if you look at our deal, which basically referred to by most people as the Sable offshore agreement, that deal. You know, when I ask workers in that field, you know, are you happy with that? And by and large, when I'm talking about workers in that field, I'm talking about the construction industry. And I ask those workers, do you think we've got the best benefits? And to a person, they say no. They say that their industry would have acquired somewhere between 10 to 14 months' work during the erection of the Goldboro plant. But by and large, they have not seen it. There's not been that intensive type of work hours that you would have assumed that would have come with those types of projects with that type of money floating around. And what is happening is you see the residual effect of that being offshore or at best outside the boundaries of Nova Scotia. So what we have to say when we look at the resolution today, why aren't we getting the best benefits? Why is government, apparently not being the one that's pursuing this on behalf of the citizens of this province? Why is Nova Scotia not accruing those benefits? Why is it that we see there's residential use in New Brunswick and none in Nova Scotia? Why do we see our natural gas being used for industrial uses in New England and not being done for industrial reasons here in Nova Scotia? So what we have is an industry that's seeing our resource shipped out of Nova Scotia with very little real return for us. If you look at the Sable deal, and you look how it's structured, is it structured at the commodity at the wellhead? No, it's structured on a province or on a profit-wide basis, which I mean, you know, you wonder like a large company like ExxonMobil, if ExxonMobil, want to play fast and loose a bit with the books and say, okay, and put extra people on their books, and they'll never realize a profit from the Sable offshore, theoretically, and therefore we'll always be the loser on that. If you look at another aspect of the Sable agreement, it's a 20-year agreement, which industry experts are telling us now that the resource may be depleted in 17 years. Again, what we'd have is the large end of that. If we were to see any kind of accruement, it will accrue to us in the last 5 years. So basically what we'll see is maybe 2 years of some kind of real return for us, and that will be it over a 17-year lifespan. So, that's why this resolution is here today. This resolution, comes from the opposition, and it's not meant to be a resolution of really like trying to hit the government between the eyes with a bat. It's, this is really, I would hope that the government would see this in I think this in the way it's intended. It's critical of government, and I make no apologies for it. But I think as debaters in this House, I think that we can disagree over how things get done. But I think what we have to do is make sure that such a vital piece of our resource industry as the offshore is debated in the open, and that we know that if we're selling that resource, that we're getting the best we can from it. Because I look at this province historically, and I see a province that really hasn't done very well around its resource-based industry for its rate of return. I got to look no further than my back door at the Lingan mine and the Phelan mine. And did we really ever get the return of our investment, whether it was actually dollars or in the sense of the labor, that commodity we put into our coal fields? That was never really a resource that we got our full share in. I think when we look at our forestry industry, are we getting the max out of that industry? And I would say, no, we're not. Whether it's through silviculture or however, whether it's the pulp industry, whether it's the softwood industry, I don't think we've ever really come up with agreements that benefit all of Nova Scotians by way of how we deliver that resource. I think that the largest one we can point to of a resource that was just pilfered from us is our fishing industry. Our fishing industry, we're basically this province is a peninsula, so we're almost completely surrounded by water. There's not a community, I don't think, in this province that doesn't rely in some little way on the fishing resource industry. But yet we've allowed that to be decimated. The only, really kind of active, ongoing, profitable side of fishery for a foreseeable future in this province is the lobster industry and some other inshore fishery. But what we've done, well, I've said inshore fishery, and I would believe crab would fall within the inshore fishery. So we would say these things and say, look, we didn't protect our resource when it was there, and now it's gone, and it's too late to do that. Now, we have to make a clear line of how we're going to protect the resource of our offshore oil. We don't know how much more play is left out there. We don't know that, that if there's, the exploration side, whether people will say, okay, that's it, we're not going to do it anymore, we're going to go somewhere else. And so I don't know if we have another chance, another kick at this cat, as they say, Mr. Speaker. But what I do know, if we don't start putting it into place and to be the owner of our own resource, to tell through the Canadian Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, that this is our resource, and if they don't want to participate in the rules as we structure it, then maybe that resource should stay there for a while longer. If we're not going to get the real benefits, the hard benefits of employment, and indeed the funding, the royalties. I know royalties, as they say, is just a polite word for tax. If we don't want, if they don't want to participate in those type of regimes in a way that will best benefit Nova Scotia and the Nova Scotia taxpayer, then I think we have to start looking hard at that. I think we should look seriously at our past mistakes around our other resources. I think there's a wealth of information to be found in that. Whether it's our coal industry, our gypsum industry is another fine example of where we just gave the resource away. Sure. All these resources, farming, fishery, mining, are all ones that we've always negotiated on a very weak position from, and obviously, what's more shameful about that, we should have been in positions of strength. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the reason to bring this resolution to this House today. It's sure it comes out of the frustration of the ExxonMobil deal, and sure, you know, we could stand here and say derogatory things about one another, but I think I wanted to get these words into Hansard, into this debate, to realize that, look, it's about time a light went on in this province, that we have not been getting our just desserts around our resource industry. It's about time that we as Nova Scotians stand up and say that we have a rightful place, we have ownership of those resources, and we should be respected for them. And if the business sector doesn't want to rely on that, then I think there's a whole other ball game to be played. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We'll resume debate with the Honourable Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for bringing forward the resolution and speaking on it here this evening. For when you look at the language of the resolution, and indeed in parliamentary fairness and appreciation for the varying opinions of the various caucuses here in this Legislative Assembly, I would like to say that I too differ in some of the perspective, and that's what the political process and the legislative process is about, and that's what offers us as elected members the opportunity to stand before this chamber and to address you and address all Nova Scotians and how we feel with regards to development and how we see fit to best do that on behalf of the well-being and the economic stability and sustainability of our province, not only now but well into the future. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the very premise of the accord that was put in place, I don't think any politician, provincially or federally, ever intended not to achieve maximum benefit for the people of Nova Scotia and to see industry grow as a result of that. And that is the case with the Sable Offshore Energy Project, a $3 billion initiative, Mr. Speaker, with 1/3 of that undertaken by Nova Scotian firms, up to 1,500 companies that have been engaged in that process to date. And now we have what is Tier 2 for the compression deck, a 7,000-ton deck, to ensure that levels can be maintained to approximately 500 million cubic feet per day. Now, what we don't disagree with, I think, as legislators, is the fact that we believe that the outcomes, that the benefit of what the accord is about, that Nova Scotians be given the benefit of full and fair consideration of our offshore resources. And that is something, Mr. Speaker, we don't vary from. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we have not varied from that when you consider when the previous Liberal government approved the DPA, or the Development Plan Approval, for the Sable Offshore Energy Project. What we're dealing with is a plan that is being implemented according to what the anticipated development would mean. And we can talk royalties, as you know, are based on production and pricing that will have a long-term benefit to the province of Nova Scotia. But indeed, instead of outcome, what we're talking about in the government's response indeed is about process. A process whereby an EPCI, where that process could come forward, Mr. Speaker, which stands for Engineering, Procurement, Construction, and Install of the project, or an all-inclusive contract or a sole source contract can be put forward. But ExxonMobil pursued that particular approach, something that the governments of Nova Scotia, and indeed the government of Canada, indicated they wanted a more open process similar to the initial phases of the Sable project, so that each of those components could be tendered and that Nova Scotia companies could be incorporated into the tendering and the bidding process all through that. And we have assurances from ExxonMobil that in this current project that could be up to $750 million, the first component, $500 million, possibly more, that they've indicated that up to $250 million, $250 million, will be achieved in Nova Scotia benefit. The uncertainty from a government point of view and a planning point of view and from a resident industry point of view is where do they fit in that process when there's one contractor in charge. So we've listened and we've responded, and we've done that by working directly with ExxonMobil, working directly with the Government of Canada, and working directly with the OTANs, the Offshore-Onshore Technologies Association of Nova Scotia, and working with their stakeholders in meeting with CAP, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, and ensuring that we have the full benefit. Because I think what's important to the debate that we have is to understand that it's shared responsibility, it's shared understanding, because there has been a lack of clarity around the terminology of what full and fair benefit means to the people of Nova Scotia, something we've undertaken with the Government of Canada. So when you look at this resolution that says, therefore be it resolved that the Ham government move immediately towards a full review of all benefit schemes from offshore resources so that all Nova Scotians can start to see much needed benefits coming into this province, well, I can't really disagree with it, Mr. Speaker, because that's exactly what the Department of Energy, what this government of Nova Scotia has been undertaking to do. That has been a result of meetings I've had with Minister Dhaliwal, the federal minister responsible, with Ministers Rock, with Ministers Thibeault, and other colleagues from the province of Nova Scotia. That's indeed part of the process as part of the National Council of Energy Ministers that just met here recently in Halifax, dealing with planning processes, ensuring that the clarity of process would be in place. So those things are undergoing, but specific to Nova Scotia and specific to the government's concern that an all-inclusive process for contract as it relates to Tier 2 is not satisfactory. And we intend to change that. And we've signaled that, and I've written to the 3 federal ministers who are associated with this to indicate to them that we're engaging in a dialogue to change the process. And we will further articulate this, Mr. Speaker, when we are at the Atlantic Roundtable with the 4 ministers that will be there from the Government of Canada and the ministers representing the 4 Atlantic provinces. So just as much as we've indicated to the Government of Canada we're willing to look at other wider processes as affects the regulatory process for all of Eastern Nova Scotia, we must first and foremost deal with those things that require being shored up, that as development proceeds, we do correct any deficiencies and work in a best effort. So governments being accountable to each other, industry being accountable to both the public that are indeed in the area that should derive the benefit is very key and very important to us all. So when I hear my honourable colleague looking in a critical eye at government, while I don't have to agree with him, I understand that he shares the same common goal, I think, of all the 3 parties of this legislature, and that's to ensure that Nova Scotians indeed are the principal beneficiaries of our offshore resources. And so to do that, we have to look at the contract that's currently forward. What we've said is that the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board has approved the contract as presented because they have no legal reason or rationale to oppose it, because the regulatory process is not in place to limit that as a consideration. And we've, while dealing with the board, dealing with the proponents and industry, have indicated our concerns, as I said, from both the provincial and federal government. That has been able to proceed. But we're working in good faith as well, Mr. Speaker, with ExxonMobil, that indeed $250 million in benefit will be derived to Nova Scotian companies and Nova Scotian interests, and that Nova Scotians will be directly employed in this process. So when you consider that up to $250 million will be committed as part of this, we have a good news story. This project proceeding also builds other momentum in the industry and ensures that production levels will be maintained to where they're needed so that the resource gets to where it's needed so that the benefits can be derived by the sale of that resource back here to the benefit of Nova Scotians. So we have to ensure that proceeds. And that will proceed. We will monitor it because, to the honourable colleague's concerns, it is an obligation of the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board to monitor benefits to the province of Nova Scotia. And we will all be very keenly and acutely aware of making sure that that indeed is done in a very timely manner over the course and the life of this project. But other projects are planned and proposed. And so as those projects come forward, it's very, very important we're all clear. Because industry said it wants clarity and of what the expectation is. And if the regulatory process is one of those, if industry has said that we have to ensure the process is streamlined to enable it to more quickly and efficiently develop projects, then we have to make sure that industry understands the expectations of the people of the province of Nova Scotia, and that's what this government is doing and will continue to do. And we've initiated further dialogue, and I'll be speaking with Minister Dhaliwal on behalf of the Department of Natural Resources Canada as we move to the next steps to initiate what indeed this motion talks about, and that is making sure that the regulatory process is further improved. It's further improved because the regulatory process has derived benefit. $3 billion project for the province of Nova Scotia. This project alone represents 15% of that. And this project, as committed by ExxonMobil for Nova Scotia content, will seek to meet the established, very well known by all parties in this government, very well known, that our goal was 34% Nova Scotian content. So we take ExxonMobil at their word, and indeed we will still achieve 34% as set out in the development plan approval that was passed by a Liberal government, that is being worked upon by this government, and we continue to make improvements. Because it is not in the interest, I think all members share, of politicizing something so vitally important, not only to opportunities for today, but indeed what our future is. And we commit to that, so we will deal with the process. And in the meantime, ensure that the outcomes are of the ultimate and foremost benefit to Nova Scotians in the interim. So we will work with ExxonMobil, and we will improve the regulatory process because we have willing partners to do that both within governments, within industry, and with the proponents. And I thank this House for this opportunity this evening, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chair will now recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker, and it is a pleasure to have the opportunity to rise and to speak on this resolution that's presented here tonight. Mr. Speaker, I did listen intently to what the Minister had to say, and before I go any further in my remarks, I guess I'd start by premising it that if the Minister had made those remarks in 1999 or even in 2000, it would have been a lot easier for us here in this House to accept what he's saying than to hear that speech 4 years into a Conservative Party mandate and to only have to hear that today, October 7, 2003. The Minister has indicated his concern about the importance of working together and not just being critical of what's happening in the offshore. But we need to look at how we got here, Mr. Speaker. The years up to and including 1999, the Tory party, under the leadership of Dr. Ham, clearly said the Liberal record on the offshore was unacceptable. They said we need a better deal for the offshore, we need better benefits for Nova Scotians, we need more investments in Nova Scotia from the offshore. So it was actually the Tory caucus that established the bar as to what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And Mr. Speaker, since 1999, Nova Scotians have been waiting to see exactly what this government was going to do to deal with the criticisms that they had leveled at the previous Liberal administration. Unfortunately, today, we're still waiting to see what they're going to do to address that. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Ham at the time said he would create a better deal for the offshore. Well, a better deal was, they mocked at the time, they said the Liberal government's proposal to have Sempra deliver natural gas from one end of this province to the next was laughable. Yet, under the Conservative government, we will now have natural gas coming to 4,000 homes in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, that is abysmal. I've yet to hear the Minister speak about that or to speak about how he would try to address that deficiency. 4,000 homes receiving gas is unacceptable in this province. No gas coming to Cape Breton unless the proposal being put forward by the town of Mulgrave and the consortium goes through. We won't even see gas on either the eastern or western end of this province. Mr. Speaker, that is not the future prosperity that we heard talk of from the Tory party when they were in opposition. Where we're at today, what the resolution talks about is a decision by ExxonMobil in the contract. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not new news. This is deja vu. We saw where a contract went down to Louisiana just a year ago. The Irvings had bid on it. They were unable to secure the contract. It went down to the U.S. Where was the regulations then on the Offshore Petroleum Board? Why was this government not at that point, and since 1999, working with the federal government, doing exactly what the minister said he's doing now? And I applaud him for those efforts. But it's too late. We just lost $750 million contract. Now, maybe we wouldn't have kept all that work here in this province. Maybe not all of our companies here would have been able to do what the entire contract asked for. And I know the minister's trying to put on the best face he can by saying there's a possibility $250 million will be spent here in the province. But we still missed out on $500 million that possibly could have come here. Now, Speaker, on that same topic, this minister has only been in his portfolio for a matter of months. And it's, I don't intend to level criticism at him personally. I certainly believe in the meetings I've had with him that he is certainly committed to this portfolio and wants to see the best done and the best benefits, which he has talked about in his speech. But, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, his government has been sending mixed messages on the energy portfolio. Created a little over a year ago, the current minister is number 3. And I don't know if that gives him any sense of security, because it doesn't tend to be a department that keeps its ministers for a very long time. So he may have some concerns with that. Mr. Speaker, you'll have to forgive me when I say that Nova Scotians are very skeptical about our offshore. And I can tell you, I represent one of the ridings which is directly impacted by natural gas here in this province. Richmond, Inverness, Guysborough, Sheet Harbour, and Antigonish. The Strait area is where natural gas is happening. And we have been going for years trying to tell our young people, don't move away. Take the training in the offshore. Take the courses they're offering. There's going to be opportunities. There will be more gas coming. We may get a fractionation plant. And then when they hear an announcement like what they heard yesterday, again, if nothing else, it is a severe blow to the morale of Nova Scotians. Because not only the government, but all of us as members have been talking about the potential in the offshore, the benefits to come here, telling our young people, don't move to Alberta, don't go to Toronto. There's going to be opportunities here. And then with that announcement, they say, there we go again. So if nothing else, this has dealt another serious blow to the morale of Nova Scotians around the offshore. And it would be very interesting, Mr. Speaker. I know there's a lot of polling that takes place in this province, and I certainly shouldn't be up to me to be encouraging more polling. But I'd love to have a question asked to Nova Scotia. Do you have confidence that the offshore industry is going to be a significant benefit to the future of this province? And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, if that question were asked today, I believe the answers would be overwhelming, and they wouldn't be overwhelming the fact that they would be something we'd be proud of. They'd be overwhelming the fact of to see the disappointment that Nova Scotians are now having at our offshore. And yes, was our government involved in the beginning stages of the offshore? It was. I would argue it was the learning stages. Now, maybe the current minister will say we're still in the learning stages, and maybe that is the case. But it seems to me that with this type of contract being awarded, this could have been prevented. These regulations should have been changed a long time ago. And I applaud the minister for his efforts today, and I certainly have indicated to him in the past that we will work with him to support those efforts, especially now under this minority situation. But we just lost out on $750 million because of regulations. And with all due respect to the minister, I know he said in his statement, this is not a criticism of the offshore companies, but it should be. Because they have a role to play also. They should not be sitting there and saying, well, look, the regulations specifically tell us this, so this is what we can do. There needs to be a responsibility on them also that we are welcoming you to our province. We are asking you to make an investment, but at the same time, we're allowing you to explore one of our own natural resources. So yes, there should be a moral, if not a legal, responsibility to make as much of that investment here in this province. So it shouldn't be seen as a criticism, as a call to attention to the offshore to say, stop reading the regulations in the fine print and stop reading them to the letter of the law. We're trying to change that. In the meantime, you should be looking to make the necessary investments in this province. So there should be that information going out. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are watching. I'll tell you, in the Strait area, I've already mentioned it to the minister. Right now, we are being told we cannot have a gas fractionation plant which would spur off other industries because there's not enough volume that is coming into the Strait area right now, especially into the Goldboro facility. Yet this government has been entertaining a proposal from El Paso to develop gas and to bring it to Shelburne, land it there, just have it converted, and then ship it off directly to the States. Now what will happen in Shelburne when they'll say, how about us getting a gas fractionation plant? They'll be told, oh, well, you don't have enough volume. And then the next one that comes along and says they want to land gas somewhere else in Nova Scotia, it'll be the same. The government must be able to say, no, you will land the gas at Goldboro until such time as the volume is there and they have the necessary capacity to be able to develop a gas fractionation plant and the industry spin-offs from there. But that's going to require the leadership of this government. They've had 4 years. They are the ones that set the bar by saying the previous government didn't do enough. We didn't say that, they said that. So now it is up to this minister and this party, the Conservative Party, to be able to show Nova Scotians that they're prepared to raise that bar and to do better than the previous administration. They've had 4 years now. They've had the opportunity to learn of the mistakes of the past, the learning, the growing pains and everything else. And 4 years later, we're on minister number 3. No wonder the offshore industry is saying that there's confusion here, because this government has sent 3 ministers now. There's the core conference this week, and I think the poor delegates coming there are going to be wondering, who's going to be the guest speaker next year? Who's going to be the minister? Because in the last 2 years, we've had 2 different people. Now, Mr. Speaker, in wrapping up, I believe the current minister we have now, has all the right intentions. He needs to be able to sit at that cabinet table and tell his premier and his government that we need to take control of our offshore. We need to do it now. We can't be sending postcards off to Ottawa hoping that that's going to solve all our problems. We need to take charge. I believe he's heard from the other parties that we're willing to work together.
The time allotted for debate has expired. The House is adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.